reconvene our city workshop of September 12th. We initially met on-site at the city pool, Highland Pool. Took a tour of the facilities there and recessed after that tour and came back to city council, so reconvening our city council meeting. Item number 2 is a discussion possible action regarding the Highland Park Pool, creation of an action committee to head the project from start to finish, inclusive but not limited to financing, design, public outreach, and oversight committee. Eddie, you taking the lead?
Yes, Mayor and Council. All right, as a follow-up to the field trip out to Highland Park, I'll start real quick with a brief, Kim, can you get the, thank you. We're going to do a real quick slideshow introductions. Don Wolf, Municipal Finance Services, is here to discuss financing mechanisms with us. Dr. Mike Simpson, of course, Superintendent of Schools, and then Bill Myers, Myers Engineering. We're going to go through really brief top talking points on Highland Park. We'll talk about the financing mechanisms. We need to establish a committee or subcommittee of the council. The idea with that committee would then be the public outreach engagement. And then lastly, we want to talk about our timeline for what's next, our next steps. So as we looked at, we were just there, constructed in the 1940s. It is operated via the joint operating agreement with the YMCA. The city of Guthrie pays the Y $10,000 annually. Had the pool open this year, including the $10,000 from the city of Guthrie, the YMCA would have lost $21,000 in operating costs for this season alone. Requires approximately 240,000 gallons of water to fill it up, about 3 weeks in preparation time. Existing pool replacement, so an updated cost estimate for replacement, $4.5 to $5 million. I'll break that down for you here in just a minute. As best we can tell, it leaks approximately 40,000 gallons of water a day. As you saw in the chemical house, there is a flow meter on the 3-inch main that runs to the pool. There's 40,000 gallons of water a day that are running through that flow meter that we cannot account for. 90-day season, you're looking at 3.6 million gallons of water, equates to about $20,000 in lost water costs, and water we're not seeing. Concrete issues, you see where prior to last couple of years we've made some corrections. That's what the surface and the decking around the pool looked like prior to Tenny's guys making the corrections they've made. This is what has been proposed prior to my tenure. The 2023 cost estimate of what you see here is approximately $9 million. Has a capacity of 500 patrons, would be ADA accessible with 0 depth entry, would include a new bathhouse, shade structures, diving board, slides, and separate pools and swimming areas. Cost estimating, I say, Eddie, where'd you come up with the $4.5 to $5 million figure? We've consulted with many different pool industry experts, from aquatic architects to actual construction companies. The best figure we've been given is $650 to $1,000 per square foot of water surface area. You break that down into the existing pool size, that comes out to about $5 million. Tenny, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, absolutely correct. And your higher number, the 650, when you start going up to that 1,000, that's when you start getting into where you're adding different amenities, additional slides or water features or things like that. That's when you start climbing to the $1,000. But just a basic pool, swim area pool, you're somewhere around the $650 per square
foot of water surface area. And we were quoted that by both the construction company and the aquatic architect. So Andy Smith and then Carruthers, I believe? Carruthers Construction, which is currently doing the retrofitting in Weatherford.
Yes.
Okay. What we have seen there's several questions. Well, what's actually wrong with the pool? Well, that's the million-dollar question. If we could answer that, we would be a lot further down the road than we are. So having that information in hand, we've had two estimates, anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 on the high end, to do some testing on the plumbing in the pool and try to figure out where that 40,000 gallons of water loss is. There's lots of speculation. The first answer most folks would say is Hudson Lake, sits right below the pool, but we've never had a fish kill. There's no chlorination in the lake that we can tell. Something we looked at earlier just a little bit ago, the sanitary sewer runs right between the lake and the pool. And oftentimes what happens, any sewer that is gravity is going to run against the lowest elevation point, and subsequently it would make sense that there may be some infiltration. We will come back to this. I think one of our next steps will be to spend the money to actually evaluate the pool from a professional and give us an outline, not just a grade of the existing pool, but what are the next steps. Financing options. So before we jump too heavy off into this, I'll introduce John Wolf, have him come up, and we'll explore all possibilities. One thing I do want to mention, Dr. Simpson's here because the question has been asked numerous times, not only of me, but also Dr. Simpson himself. Is there any possibility for a partnership between the school and the city? And the short answer is always yes. The long answer is a little more complicated. So as we get more into that, we can have that open dialogue as well. So general information when it comes to financing. The Guthrie Public Works Authority is limited by the trust indenture to $8 million of new debt each year. So if you have a $9 million pool, there's problem number one. Any financing over the $8 million would then require two separate financing issues. So again, we would be able to do up to $8 million in financing in fiscal year 24, and then in fiscal year 25, we would do the subsequent $8 million, hoping and praying timelines line up. Two options for financing. You have a general obligation bond, which again, I'll say that superintendent's here. Municipalities and school districts have an unspoken, unwritten rule that municipalities don't go for ad valorem taxes. Sometimes you don't have any choice. But however, that's not our preference. We don't want to pursue a general obligation bond just because of the ad valorem impact on a school district and how that adversely affects the school district. The other choice would be a sales tax election. What we're going to propose discussing will be an extension of the existing CIP tax, and I will let John talk more on that as soon as we get there. General obligation bond, as I mentioned, generally municipalities are discouraged from seeking a GO bond. The main reason that's your school district's lifeline. That's how they do capital projects. The current net assessed value, NAV, of the city of Guthrie, our city limits, a little over $66 million. If we were to do a GO bond, we'd be looking at a par value of $10 million with a 15-year term for repayment. The second option would be an extension of the CIP tax. From today, we have approximately 7.5 years left on that existing 3/4 cent sales. What we would look at to fund the pool and some other utility projects, as well as potentially finish out Owen Field, would be a 7.5-year extension from where we're at today. And that would give us a full 15-year term, which would then allow us not to increase any tax rates. However, we could advance the funding and have it in place to do what we need to do. GPWA, GEDA, sales tax revenue bond, it would have to go through one of the authorities. The city cannot commit any future year revenues. Again, this sales tax would not be a new tax. The GO bond route would be a new tax. John, I'm going to turn it over to you with projected expenses on the GO bond, and then we'll go into sales tax revenue. So, can you read that? You want the handout?
I'll walk over here, I can read it. I realize I can always point, so. More than anything, I'm gonna answer questions that you guys may have tonight. The essence of what your options are, and what the tax impact monthly is on your different homeowners, commercial owners, but as Eddie has addressed here, this is a report that we have provided to the city that shows 3 different home values of $100,000, $150,000, and $250,000. And essentially what you want to look at is what is our monthly tax impact. And if we're looking at a 15-year term, your impact the first year is a lot more than the impact the last year, because your debt payments, the way Oklahoma law is set up, your debt payments actually go down every year. You can't really set up equal total debt payments. And so, as addressed here, if you guys can read this, if you're looking at a $150,000 home, you're looking at the very first year, based on current interest rates, the monthly tax impact. Once again, on a $150,000 home is about $20 a month. That will slowly decline to eventually around, I think the last is maybe $10 or $11, but your average over that 15-year term is $15 a month. So when you're looking at what does it cost to finance this $10 million project.
You said on a 15-year note at a $150,000 house, you said the average was 15, it's 1160, unless I'm reading that incorrectly.
Yeah, he did it backwards. These are levies.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, let's just.
Okay,
focus
all
down.
right. Yeah. I can read some of it, not all
Yeah, I
of it.
understand, it's pretty hard to read all the way over there. But, so we wanted to have that in your head, what does it cost us monthly, and for how long? 15-year term is, I think a reasonable term with GO for a pool. You're gonna have maintenance on that pool after so long. We try not to have bonds go out longer than the useful life of the asset that we're putting together. Now you guys probably all laughed if you just looked at a pool that had a little longer life than 15 years. Now what its useful life, when that started needing maintenance, is certainly different today. It depends on what kind of pool you're looking at constructing, so how much additional dollars you have to put in. But that's an example of what the impact would be on your property owners, homestead property owners within the city of Guthrie.
With bond,
Pardon?
With the bond, yes.
with a bond.
On a bond.
and we could always explore the route of going 20 years if we wanted to. The difference in that first year monthly tax increase is going to be a couple bucks. So for an additional 5 years, we can lower that payment by a couple dollars. But that's sort of the GO bond nuts and bolts. Any questions on that piece?
Well, so for public buy-in, you would need to get closer to what is our average home price. It's probably not 250, it's probably over 150, I would think. And so, just keeping that in mind.
No, I agree. I mean, probably, let's say it's closer to 2, split that difference. And so,
So probably $25. Shake you
Give or
down.
take.
So how does increasing this property tax to serve this bond affect the schools
well, I can,
directly?
Well, because that's how they get their funding.
Right, but you're,
there's a multitude of reasons how schools are affected in that when you're dealing with a overlapping taxing entities, you have the county, you have the city, you have the school district. The school district relies completely on ad valorem tax, general obligation bonds to address their infrastructure needs. And so when they look at going to the public and you, a lot of you here remember that there was a period where you had multiple failed elections. And our first one, 15, I remember that.
John works for the school district as well. So.
One thing, there's some differences between the municipality and the school district on how a bond election goes, because we have to meet a supermajority threshold of 60% plus one vote, which has been an incredibly high threshold in this community. There were 10 failed bond issues in a row from the time that the stadium bond issue was passed until we passed the bond that the large project was Charter Oak Elementary. Along that time, it was inflationary and with construction as our old facilities decayed. And so when you tack on top of the needs for a school district in a, as we all know, a growing school district where we need more desks, the possibility of making it harder than the already difficult threshold of 60% when your bond could be passed at a simple majority of 50%. And so that, with a paired with all of the issues of a community that has at times struggled to pass bond issues, period, could be almost a stop sign for growth in the community. Because I think what we saw historically is a flat line in this community, and now we see residential growth, and the people that I talk to that are promoting the residential growth, the developers, are attributing that to the fact that we are passing bond issues for the school. And so I think it's a very, that's, and I'm not gonna deny, I have a bias on this. I think everyone would understand that, but I think that that's something that has to be, you have to be cognizant of that. And John knows where we are as well, as far as when we can bond again, and we're getting ready to have a board retreat on the 25th of September where we talk about what our next steps are with regard to facilities and capital improvements to meet the growth that, as we all know, the residential growth that is platted, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to happen eventually.
Yeah. Mike, on the Charter Oak, what, is there like, 10 years left? How many years left on that?
Charter Oak is paid off.
Is it paid off?
We've sold most of the bonds for Cotterell now. And remember, Cotterell is the next project that we have, but we couldn't do it any sooner because we had to wait. The other piece to this puzzle is a school district cannot be in debt by more than 10% of our net assessed valuation. And it's about 237 million is what I pulled up for while you were talking. And so we can sell those bonds and pay them off and then sell some more. But that's essentially our credit limit on our credit card with the public. And so that, with all of that in mind, with COVID and everything else, with the inflation, originally our budget figure for Cotterell was 13.4 million. Now it's looking more like 17.5 million. So if we hadn't gotten the federal money, we probably wouldn't be able to build Cotterell. And that's just the reality of that bond was passed in 19 before COVID, and we all know what's happened to construction prices since COVID.
Well, that's what I was saying. That particular bond is still in play.
The
For
bond
Cotterell.
for Cotterell, not
Right.
for Charter Oak. We've gotten those off the
Yeah.
books and sold more bonds, but we have another $3 million bond that we still have to sell in August of '24 in order to get the full funding for Cotterell.
But that all came from that original bond passage, right?
In 2019,
In 2019.
not the 2015.
Okay.
2015 was Charter Oak.
Okay.
2019 was Cotterell. Yeah, and a lot of other projects.
And the school district has a much larger area, obviously.
Right.
That's not, yeah, they're almost 3.5 times the size. So when you're looking at the project that you're wanting to finance with general obligation bonds, you have such a smaller pot.
Yeah.
And you have to think about what is your project and who's benefiting from that project. And is that a project that will actually serve more than just the citizens that live within the corporate boundaries of the city of Guthrie. And so it'll pull in families from Charter Oak. That's not within, obviously within the corporate city limits. They'll enjoy that benefit. It's a tough sell because you're, like I said, you're about 30% of the net assessed valuation of the district. You're not even 1/3 of the size. And you're trying to spread abnormals based on dividing out your annual debt payments over the actual valuation of that particular entity. And it's,
Well, and plus we're trying to increase rooftops, and you can't increase rooftops without school. So,
you look at all your battles.
Mike, when you did that first bond issue, you knew then that you were gonna have to do another one, didn't you?
Oh, we.
Because there's just
Well,
too
we're gonna
much.
continually have to
Hang on a
do.
second, let me answer.
One of the first times that when I got my hands around everything on the challenges in this community with regard to our school facilities, and I remember telling the chamber director at the time and a few others, if we had $100 million, that would be a start. That's where we were. And, you know, since then, we've gotten about $35 million in bond funds to do the work, but you know,
You're probably gonna have to do it again then, in
Yeah.
order to continue to grow and do the
that was
thing.
assuming that we had flat lines.
Just like we're gonna have to do.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to continue to do sale taxes and stuff to keep things flowing. We got a lot of work to do.
It's a good problem to have, though, because we know we're gonna have growth.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions on Leo bonds?
Thank you.
All right, we'll roll right into CIP sales tax. The sales tax, of course, that was passed prior to me, the CIP, which is the 3/4 cent sales. This year, we're looking at $1.7 million. So that's what the 3/4 cent has generated this year alone. So what John did for us was ran a model that says, okay, you've got 7.5 years left. If we assume you've got $1 million a year, plus or minus, we'll get you the 15 years. We can advance finance $16 million approximately. Well, in order to do that, remember we have the $8 million cap. So we can't advance finance the rest of the 15 years. Another point I would like to bring up is this council, and not every member of this council, but the city council has previously committed the rest of the funding for the CIP through its sunset. Now, we haven't spent those dollars, but for example, $4 million is committed to paying off the wastewater treatment plant, $4 million is committed to the industrial park, $1 million is committed to Owen Field, $2.6 million is committed to our annual street overlay project, and then there's $600,000 which is committed to Sooner Road, and we've used that as a grant match. So we haven't spent any of that money. I think if we were to evaluate needing to utilize any of those funds, I think we would be safe pulling the $4 million from the industrial park. We need to keep the $4 million that's committed to the wastewater treatment plant debt. We need to keep the 2.6 that's committed to the annual overlay program. And of course, we are committed on Owen Field. So that's what's remaining through the sunset. If we took those dollars matched with the 7.5-year extension, that's what we end up netting. So in 2024, we could again finance $7.9 million. Cost of issuance, that's going to be our bond counsel, our financial advisor, and then of course Mr. Wheeler, and that'll get us a net total of $7.7 million. We would then turn around and do the same thing fiscal year 2025. I'll be honest with you, that's probably the most attractive option if we're going to do anything as far as totally replacing the pool. This would not be a tax increase. It's an extension of a tax. I understand, the narrative that comes with that. Unfortunately, we have a problem and we need to solve it. Some of you were here when the original tax was passed and you were sold a $2 million pool. I don't think a $2 million pool was ever reasonable. And I won't talk bad about any of my predecessors. However, we have the funds, we need to pursue the rest of the funds in addition to that CIP and address this. Any questions on the CIP sales tax?
I like the scenario where we pay the 10 or 20 grand to someone to come in and, I mean, because right now, we're just, putting a thumb out and we don't know where we're at, cost-wise on this pool. Whether it be a complete retrofit or a complete redo. I think, to determine what you do, you have to have a hard number,
Sure.
so.
So the two quotes, one was $9,500 and it was contingent upon the design contract of a new pool. So the design contract, he wants 10% of the cost of construction when the contract's awarded. I'm not comfortable making
No.
that commitment, not comfortable recommending that you guys make that commitment. Because again, if something goes awry and we don't build a pool, then we owe this gentleman 10% of whatever it would have cost.
Right.
Let's
What
not
on?
get in that boat. I like the $16,000 figure. That's a quote from Carruthers Construction. Again, Bill Myers, our engineer, has worked with them. We've received good feedback from them. Next steps, I believe that's the first step.
But that's for definitive answers, right? As far as
Yes.
what's wrong?
That's for retrofit
Okay,
or
okay.
build new.
So they're gonna come in, they're gonna look at our plumbing, they're gonna look at the pool, they're gonna look at everything that we have today. They're gonna paint a picture and say, for your pool to be operational, for you to not have water loss, for you to have code compliance, this is what you have to do. Now, the flip side of once we start touching the pool, the little things that Tenny mentioned, like the fence posts,
All of it is
in the gate.
replaced.
We've been given a lot of grace by the state, and we feel pretty confident that if we do anything at the pool, we're going to get the hammer on the things that we've been given the grace on. So keep in mind,
So it's still rebuilding the pool?
No, it might be rebuilding the gate system.
it might be a gate, it might be a valve, it might be you now have to have zero depth entry. That's extreme, but it could happen. So I just want to paint the whole picture for the council, make sure you understand. Once we start down this road, we could very well be sitting here going, we're gonna have to build a new pool, and now we need to make that decision, so.
I'm with Brian that I think that spending the $10,000 to $20,000 or whatever, $16,000 to find out what's going on is a good idea.
Well, we have to know.
I think that's a good investment.
So in the meantime, I have visited with both the city of Kingfisher and the city of Cushing in regards to their aquatic center. Kingfisher, of course, has the indoor pool. Cushing's aquatic center runs about the same timeline that ours does, last week in May, first week in August. And their annual operating budget's about $225,000. So with that, they have to have 12 lifeguards on deck at all times. Now, they've got slides, they've got a splash pad with some features, etc. But for the same period that we pay, approximately $40,000, Cushing's paying $220,000. Kingfisher was a little more extravagant. Of course, they're open year-round. $336,000 was their projected expenses this budget year. Again, they're open year-round. Just keep in mind, if we want to explore that option, I think that's a great option, something we could offer the community. But it's 10 times the current operating budget of the pool. And so when we talk about that, where that money comes from has to be top of mind. Because again, it's a reoccurring cost. That doesn't go away. We can't finance that. It's something that's on the city.
So, we've never got a clear picture over the years how many people are actually using this pool in the past on a daily basis. I don't know if records have been kept over the last 5 and 10 years of that.
Sure.
But it would be nice to know. One thing that we could thumb mark is how much did we pay how much did we pay on Edmund admittance to their deal?
We spent about $25,000, Kim. So we spent about $25,000 sending kids to Pelican Bay. I think that showed us two things. One, we have citizens that will utilize the park with those amenities. Two, I think we had a large variety of Guthrie citizens that were already going to Pelican Bay
Yeah.
because of those amenities. So, of course, the data is always going to be skewed. But in the time from middle of June to the second week in August, we spent about $25,000.
So our pool's just old and boring, and they like Pelican Bay better.
Well, it was free.
It was free, you know. go
Well, and
ahead.
plus they
So
were
those
probably
numbers are
going
skewed.
anyway, is what we were already talking about.
Sure. It,
I mean, my gosh, how can you depend on those numbers?
right. So,
They're inaccurate.
it was a use, though. We did.
Yeah, it
have-
was great. It was a great deal. I'm glad we were able to do it, but how many people would go, what's the cost of Pelican Bay otherwise?
Pelican Bay took $8 per entry.
Okay? And I don't know, what was our cost of entry during our operation?
YMC run it, I wanna say it was like $3. Is what
Can I
YMCA
stick to
was
$3?
charging.
If you build an $8 million facility? I mean, I'm just saying, a lot of kids, that might put a lot of kids out of the availability to go at $8 a day. I'm sure it would.
Well, it's probably gonna have to be more than that.
Well, there you go, there's another problem.
That's what we talked about years back on the $4 million pool. I don't know where the $2 million came up, it was 4.
I don't think you can ever
Or
expect
close
the
to
pool to
it.
pay for itself. I think that's just
Yeah,
blue
it's
sky.
gonna be a loss leader. It's a benefit to the community. I mean,
Sure, and that's really all there is to it. You can't, it's not gonna pay for itself.
It's kinda like the splash pads. I mean, they're running pretty much nonstop, right?
So
And they're heavily used. They're
Yeah.
a great amenity to have, but,
Kingfisher's revenue was
But-
about $90,000 a year. So their expenditures were $339, and they made about $90,000. So they lost $230,
yeah.
$240.
And the splash pads are free. Remember that?
Splash pads are free.
And what's Kingfisher's fee to get in there?
I apologize, I don't have that for you.
Okay, yeah, but,
Well, you'd have to look more at Cushing probably. Because they're not indoor, right?
Cushing's not indoor. Yep.
and it's nice. I've been over there several times.
Yep. I visited both this weekend myself, so.
Well, I think open year round is completely out of the question.
But I do know, like you and I discussed, if we were gonna put a committee together, my opinion would be that we put a committee together outside of this council, kinda like we did on the baseball field, deal, because they're gonna have to garner the buy-in of the people, of the public, on extending the sales tax, if that's the way we go.
I like that.
Are we all in agreement on spending the $16,000 to figure out what's wrong with the pool?
Agreed.
Yeah, we have to.
That's a no-brainer. That's the foundation on where we go from here
Yeah.
next.
Exactly.
point.
I think we have
So
another,
let's
It's gotta be done.
We could solicit another quote. I don't know that it would do us any good. I feel pretty confident in this one from Carruthers.
well, and Bill, you are confident
You've
in them,
worked with them
correct?
before.
So,
Okay, that's what we
Just to make
need.
sure, Eddie, that 16 grand is not an estimate on, oh, here's what we're gonna do to build a new place. That's gonna be we'll know exactly what pipes are messed up, where the leaks are, et cetera, right?
Yep.
Okay.
and then plus, will they also be able to quote us on retrofitting versus building new?
I think that's a possibility. They're in the construction company, they're gonna want that quote, they're gonna want that work.
Yeah.
Unless they're a licensed construction manager via Title 61, then that won't be an option directly.
Who's gonna be able to advise us on the code implication?
I would hope this contractor would be able to.
Yes.
So do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
So before we vote, funding mechanisms, what are the thoughts as far as how to proceed?
I think we go with that.
I don't think we do anything that
You
takes
know,
from the schools.
Yeah, I think the sales tax is the
Yes,
is
definitely.
the only route that we've got to go. You know, I don't think we can encumber upon the financial resource that goes to the school system.
No, I don't
It's
either.
obviously a critical component of our community. We don't want to go back to where we were in having 10 bond issues fail.
Sure.
And I think, you know, unfortunately, sales tax, you know, the extension of it, it sounds like well, it isn't an increase in the sales tax, but it does impact probably more significantly the population of our community that can least afford it, to be honest with you.
Exactly.
Gasoline, food, but I think that's the reality is, that's the way we've got to go, in my mind.
Yeah, it's still minimum.
Mine too. And we can, we may find that the $4 million from the industrial park covers a complete retrofit and redo. And then this is all moot at that point.
But
And
yeah,
then we're
I
looking
think
at
we
ex-
all like this idea.
Yeah. Huh?
Okay.
There's been a motion made and seconded.
Right.
On item 4 regarding the oversight committee, I think there needs to be clarification as to how that committee is formed. So is that, I mean, the motion is just to do these things with no direction on the number of members of the committee, the makeup of that, the complexion that would be in terms of the geographic representation from,
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think the motion is to move forward with the next step, which is
$16,000.
identifying what the problems
Okay.
Yeah, none of
are.
that we can do until we know.
And just as a first step, I don't think we've gone beyond that, Grant.
So now isn't the motion
Right,
to
well, that's-
approve the 16,000?
Yes.
Yes,
So-
that's what
so-
this motion's for.
What Vice Mayor is referencing, I've got some bullet points on the agenda, just as a guide, and that's what
Right.
Dr. Dury is referencing.
right, I think there's 4 items, and the motion doesn't, it's just, you know, yeehaw, charge. That's not public policy.
No.
So-
It has to be just on the money to hire the firm.
If your motion is for the $16,000,
Yeah, that's
you've
what
got a
it's for.
second, I think we're comfortable with that. Let's explore that avenue. We'll come back to you at a later date with guidance on the remainder. I will say that if we're going to end up doing a sales tax extension or election, we need to call that election relatively soon, within the next 60 days to get it on the January ballot, unless we decide to push out for any amount of time. Our goal would be get on the January ballot, close the sale March 1, and then we can proceed. At that point, then we would go out, either do a hard bid, looking for a general contractor to replace the pool, or do a construction manager at risk with an architect combination, where they are independent of each other and then they work for the city. That way you get accurate numbers and you're competitive at all times. So that would kind of be our timeline, and then we would hope to have a pool open and ready to swim in summer of '25,
If that's the route we go.
Okay.
if that's the route we go.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to move forward with expenditure of approximately $16,000 to $18,000 to authorize the city manager to expend that amount of money to identify specific issues with the existing pool and alternative approaches to fixing those issues. Is there any other discussion?
Well, and if that can happen quick enough, and they can retrofit this pool for the money we've already got in the bank on the business, on the
Absolutely.
industrial park, then maybe 2024 that pool opens.
Yeah,
Right.
So,
absolutely.
One thing I would like to try to clarify, you said 16 to 18. What's the amount we're talking about?
The actual amount is Kenny, do you have that? It was just over $16,000.
So $17,000.
Not to exceed the amount, 16,000.
16,000 total, so that's.
Okay.
So there you go.
Okay, there we go.
All right,
That's
Thank
all I
you.
wanted to
Accept
clarify.
that.
Got a motion to second.
accept that in the motion in a second. Any other discussion? Submit your votes.
All votes are in.
See the votes. Unanimous approval then to authorize the city manager to move forward, not to exceed $16,000 with a contractor to identify the specific challenges that we have with the pool and potential remedies to that effect.
Mayor, while we're still here, are there any further questions for Municipal Finance Services, Dr. Simpson, Bill Myers?
So really, are those really the only two options we have, geo bond and sales tax,
Yes.
Yeah.
unless you want to contribute?
And Dr.
Okay,
Simpson?
all right.
I do have another question concerning Pelican Bay. Out of that $25,000, how much was for actual entry into or the ride there?
That was simply for entry into.
Okay, so we made the ride there free as well.
That's correct. And
What
we
did
had
that cost?
very, very little participation. We didn't even
Okay.
spend $1,200 on
Okay.
the trolley.
Thank you.
So it breaks down to about $3,100. I mean, 3,100 people.
Dr. Simpson, what do you think the benefits of a pool are to the school system?
Hard to say because we don't have a swim team and we're not at a point where we are ready to do an interest survey for one. And a swim team, swimming is in the winter, so and having been an athletic director at a district that had a swim team in Stillwater in the winter, I know that the cost is dramatically higher because you're talking about heating
Heated.
water and keeping it open year round. And so I don't know that I could answer that with much confidence right now.
Okay.
I think, I do think, obviously there's quality of life that we've talked about, but I think the thing that I would say, the sticking point on many of those bond issues that failed in our district was the junior high building. And so the first thing that we did is we had our architect commission a study of the junior high building to see if it was more cost effective to renovate that building and put money into it or demolish it and build new. And once we made that report public, it seemed to bring the community along off High Center to understand that we were being good stewards of their money. Sounds like that's what you guys are trying to do as well.
Yeah, I agree.
How many schools in the state have a swim team, do you know?
Grant, it's probably 35 or so.
It's
the
a six.
It's the
it's
6As and a few 5As and just and very few of the smaller districts. It's pretty much a given that a 6A school will have swimming. There are probably half of the 5As that have it, and then just a smattering of the smaller districts that have competitive swimming.
Does having a swim team benefit the district in any way, shape, or form in terms of its Title IX compliance? And
I'd say it's neutral because we would have boys and girls both. And so we would add opportunities for both boys and girls. So I don't know that it enhances or makes it worse. I think it's probably a neutral situation with regard to Title IX.
Aren't those pools usually at the school, at the facility?
Some are, some are not. Edmond has a shared with the YMCA.
Palka?
The Stillwater has used the YMCA pool there for years.
Doesn't Ponca City use theirs too?
Ponca City it was originally built as the YMCA, but it is now under complete city management. And Ponca City Public Schools pays, just like Stillwater, they pay the entity that's running it a fee for its use. But there was with both the YMCA in Stillwater and the pool was constructed in Ponca, there was no capital contribution from the school district beyond, I know in both places we put, when I was in Stillwater and also when I was in Ponca, we put a scoreboard. You know, we put some things in, we may have bought some bleachers, you know, but it wasn't, the hard operating costs are borne out and paid for by the entity that's running.
Operate.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
We're growing too, right? So
We're
we're
up
gonna
about
be,
50 students from this time last year, and that's with most of the homes that have been platted inside the city limits, not.
Not outside.
Not even built yet,
yeah.
that we're talking about that are.
So I'm gonna say we're not too far away, probably a couple of years from going to 6A2.
I don't know that we're there,
Okay.
but I know that we've got to prepare for growth as a school district.
And as a city.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's why if we leave the bond issue out of the equation, it allows that.
I would prefer we do that, just because that's what we should do.
That's what we
Yeah.
should.
If the school district came out tomorrow and said, we're gonna go for sales tax collection, I'd say, Dr. Simpson, let's,
Let's have coffee.
but there's a mutual respect there, as there should be.
Okay, anything else you want to add to this point of the discussion?
No, Mayor?
Okay.
No further comment.
All right. Item number 3, comments from City Council. Vice Mayor Aguirre,
Nothing for me, thank you.
Councilman Bothroyd,
Nope.
Councilman Case?
No.
No? Councilman Williams?
No, sir.
Councilman Taylor?
Kenny, thank you. I know it's tough to go through and show us around all this stuff, so I appreciate you, taking us out and give us a look. It's a long time ago, so I appreciate it.
Councilman Ralph?
Not this time.
Okay. I don't have any other comments either.
James or.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned. Thank you.